The cold bit into Jason's skin as he pulled his hoodie tighter around his body. The streets of New York were merciless in December, and at only 16, he had already learned how cruel life could be. He shifted against the brick wall of an alley, his makeshift shelter for the night. His stomach growled, reminding him it had been almost 2 days since his last real meal. A stale sandwich a kind stranger had handed him. As the city bustled around him, Jason watched people rush by, their faces buried in scarves, eyes fixed on their destinations. Nobody paid attention to the homeless kid sitting on the curb. Nobody ever did, until something unusual happened. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb across the street. A sharply dressed man, talking frantically on his phone, stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the kind of authority Jason had only ever seen in movies. His tailored navy blue suit screamed money, real money. Jason wasn't interested in rich men. They passed by every day, never sparing him a glance. But something caught his eye as the man hurried into a building. A small, brown leather wallet slipped from his pocket and landed on the sidewalk. For a moment, Jason hesitated. His empty stomach and the biting wind made it easy to justify keeping it. He could take the cash, maybe get a hot meal, a warm place to sleep for the night. It wasn't like the guy would miss it, but something inside him wouldn't let him do it. His mother had always taught him to do the right thing before she was gone. With a deep sigh, Jason pushed himself up from the curb and crossed the street. He snatched the wallet off the ground and flipped it open. A thick wad of $100 bills sat inside, along with several platinum credit cards. His heart pounded. He'd never held so much money in his life. Then he saw the ID. Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Enterprises. Jason recognized the name instantly. Cole Enterprises was one of the biggest companies in the city. This man wasn't just rich, he was powerful. Jason clenched the wallet. He could walk away. He could change his life with just what was in his hands. But instead, he inhaled deeply and marched into the towering building the CEO had just entered. The lobby was pristine, marble floors gleaming under the massive chandelier. A receptionist eyed him suspiciously as he approached the desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. Jason swallowed. He suddenly felt out of place, his ragged hoodie and dirty jeans making him look like he belonged anywhere but here. "I need to see Mr. Cole," he stammered. He dropped his wallet outside. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, glancing him up and down. "Mr. Cole doesn't take unscheduled visitors." Jason's fingers tightened around the wallet. "Please, I just need to return it," she sighed, clearly ready to dismiss him. But before she could, a deep voice cut through the air. "What's going on?" Jason turned. Ethan Cole stood there, phone in hand, looking as commanding as he had outside. His sharp green eyes landed on Jason, then the wallet. "You dropped this," Jason said, holding it out. Ethan took it, his expression unreadable as he checked inside. His brows lifted slightly when he saw nothing had been taken. He looked back at Jason, something flickering in his gaze. "Curiosity. Maybe you found this and decided to return it?" he asked. Jason nodded, shifting on his feet. "Yeah." Ethan studied him for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and held it out. "For your honesty." Jason stared at it. The money would help, but something about taking it felt wrong. He wasn't expecting a reward, he just wanted to do the right thing. "I don't need it," Jason said quietly. Ethan's expression shifted. He wasn't used to people turning down money, especially people who clearly needed it. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jason." "Jason," Ethan repeated, as if testing how it sounded. "Where do you live?" Jason hesitated. "Around." Ethan didn't push, but something in his gaze darkened, as if he understood exactly what that meant. The receptionist, still watching, cleared her throat. "Mr. Cole, you have a meeting." "Cancel it," Ethan said without looking away from Jason. Jason blinked. "Cancel a meeting for him." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Jason, come with me." Jason's instincts screamed to refuse. Trusting people, especially rich ones, had never done him any favors. But something about Ethan Cole was different. He wasn't looking at Jason with pity or disdain. He was looking at him like he saw him. Jason nodded hesitantly as Ethan led him toward the elevator. Jason had no idea that his life was about to change forever. Jason followed Ethan Cole into the elevator, his heart pounding with uncertainty. The polished steel walls reflected his ragged appearance, making the contrast between them impossible to ignore. He didn't belong here. He was just a kid from the streets. And yet, he was about to step into the office of one of the most powerful men in the city. As the elevator doors closed, Ethan slid his phone into his pocket and turned to Jason. "How long have you been living on the streets?" Jason stiffened. "I never said I was homeless." Ethan gave him a knowing look. "You didn't have to." Jason exhaled sharply, his hands clenching into fists. He didn't need anyone's pity. He'd survived this long without help, and he wasn't about to start begging now. But there was something about Ethan's gaze, sharp, observant, but not judgmental, that made Jason drop his guard just a little. "Almost 2 years, Jason admitted. "Since I was 14. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where are your parents?" Jason looked away. "Gone." Silence filled the elevator, thick and heavy. Ethan didn't push, which Jason appreciated. Most people would pry, would ask the same stupid questions he'd heard 1,000 times. Ethan just nodded, as if he already understood more than Jason had said. The elevator dinged, and the door slid open to reveal an expansive office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. Jason had never seen anything like it. The room was sleek, modern, with a massive desk at the center and plush leather chairs that probably cost more than everything Jason had ever owned in his life. Ethan gestured for Jason to sit, then walked over to a sleek bar cart and poured himself a glass of water. "You want one?" Jason shook his head. "I'm good." Ethan took a sip before sitting across from him. Ethan smirked. "No, you didn't. Most people would have taken the money and run, especially if they needed it." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't looking for a reward. That's exactly why I'm offering you one." Jason's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "You're smart, honest, and from what I can tell, you're a survivor. That's not something you learn in school. That's something life teaches you. And I respect that." Jason's defenses shot up. "What are you getting at?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I want to give you a job." Jason's breath hitched. He hadn't expected that. "A job?" Ethan nodded. "I don't believe in handouts, but I do believe in second chances. I can't imagine what you've been through, but I know talent when I see it. If you're willing to work, I'll pay you fairly, enough to get you off the streets." Jason's mind raced. This had to be a trick. Nobody offered things like this, not without expecting something in return. He'd learned the hard way that people didn't just help out of the kindness of their hearts. "What's the catch?" Jason asked wearily. Ethan chuckled. "No catch, just an opportunity. You'd start as an intern, working in my offices, learning, earning. If you prove yourself, there's room to grow." Jason stared at him. It sounded too good to be true. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Because someone once did the same for me." Jason hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to run. But there was something about this offer about Ethan that made him want to believe. "What do you say?" Ethan asked. Jason swallowed hard, his hands gripping the armrests of the chair. For the first time in years, hope flickered inside him. Jason's heart pounded as he stared at Ethan, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. A job, a real chance to change his life. It didn't seem real. His survival instincts screamed at him to be cautious. Too many times, people had offered him help only to turn their backs on him when it became inconvenient. Was this just another game? Was Ethan Cole testing him somehow? Jason leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "Why should I trust you?" Ethan didn't flinch. "You shouldn't. Trust is earned." "I'm not asking for it." I'm asking if you're willing to take a chance. Jason studied in, trying to see past the polished suit and the businessman's cool exterior. Ethan was powerful, no doubt. He had everything Jason didn't: money, security, control. But there was something else in his eyes, something Jason wasn't used to seeing in men like him. Respect. He exhaled slowly. What would I have to do? Ethan smirked, as if he had been expecting that response. You'd start as an intern, assisting my team with small tasks, running errands, handling files, learning how this world works. In return, you'll get a paycheck, a roof over your head, and a real shot at something better. Jason's breath caught. A roof over my head. Ethan nodded. If you're serious about this, I'll set you up with a temporary place, somewhere safe. But it's not charity. You'll work for it. Jason clenched his fists. He wanted to believe this was real, but the world had taught him that kindness always came with a price. And if I say no, Ethan shrugged, then you walk out of here the same way you came in. No hard feelings. That surprised Jason. He had expected some kind of manipulation, a push to make him accept, but Ethan wasn't forcing in. The choice was his. He thought about the cold streets, the hunger gnawing at his stomach, the exhaustion that never seemed to go away. He thought about sleeping in alleys, about constantly watching his back, about the nights he spent wondering if he'd even wake up the next morning. And then he thought about something else. His mother's voice. You're stronger than this, Jason. Don't let the world break you. Jason sat back, exhaling sharply. I'll do it. Ethan smiled. Good choice. Less than an hour later, Jason found himself sitting in the back of Ethan's black Mercedes, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. The leather seats were softer than any bed he had slept in for years, and the warmth inside the car made him realize just how frozen he had been. This feels weird, Jason muttered. Ethan, sitting beside him, smirked. What does? Jason gestured around. All of it. The car, the offer, the fact that I'm here instead of digging through trash for my next meal. Ethan studied him for a moment. You're not used to people giving you a chance, are you? Jason scoffed. People don't just help guys like me. They pretend we don't exist. Ethan's expression darkened slightly. I used to think the same thing. Jason frowned. You, come on, man. You're a CEO. Ethan leaned back, his gaze distant. I wasn't always. Jason blinked. Wait, you weren't born rich? Ethan smirked. No, I was raised in a foster home. I learned early that the world doesn't hand out second chances. You have to take them. Someone gave me my first opportunity, and I took it. Now, I'm offering you the same. Jason was stunned. He had assumed Ethan was just another privileged billionaire who had never struggled a day in his life. But if what he was saying was true, then maybe he understood Jason's world better than he thought. The car slowed to a stop. Jason looked out the window and saw a sleek, modern apartment building towering over him. Ethan opened his door and stepped out. Jason hesitated. Was this really happening? Come on, Ethan said, motioning for him to follow. Jason swallowed hard and stepped out of the car. His entire life had been about surviving. Now, for the first time, he was about to see if he could actually live. Jason followed Ethan into the building, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. The lobby was massive, its marble floors gleaming under golden chandeliers. A doorman in a crisp uniform nodded at Ethan before casting a wary glance at Jason's ragged hoodie and worn-out sneakers. Jason clenched his fists, used to the judgment, but Ethan didn't seem to care. He strode forward, unfazed, as if Jason belonged by his side. They stepped into the elevator, and Jason watched as Ethan pressed the button for the 12th floor. The doors slid shut, trapping them in silence. Jason shifted uncomfortably. So, this apartment, Jason muttered, trying to play it cool. You put all your interns in places like this. Ethan chuckled. No, just you. Jason narrowed his eyes. Why? Ethan met his gaze, unreadable. Because I know what it's like to need a place to breathe. You won't be able to focus on work if you're worried about where you'll sleep at night. Jason wasn't sure how to respond to that. The kindness still felt foreign, suspicious, but at the same time, he couldn't deny that the thought of sleeping in an actual bed for the first time in years made his chest tighten. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to a long hallway. Ethan led into a door at the end and pushed it open, revealing a modern apartment that looked like something out of a movie. Jason froze. The place was small but luxurious, polished wooden floors, a gray couch, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. The kitchen had stainless steel appliances, and a narrow hallway led to what Jason guessed was the bedroom. It was more than he had ever dreamed of having. Ethan stepped aside, watching Jason's reaction. "It's yours for now. You'll have everything you need, food, clothes. Just don't trash the place." Jason ran a hand through his messy hair, his mind spinning. He had spent nights in abandoned buildings, on freezing park benches, under bridges. And now this. He turned to Ethan. "This doesn't feel real." Ethan crossed his arms. "Get used to it. If you work hard, this can be your life." Jason swallowed. He wanted to believe it, but the doubt still lingered. "What if I mess up?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Then you pick yourself up and keep going. You've already survived worse." Jason nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words. Maybe, just maybe, this was his shot. Later that night, Jason lay in the unfamiliar softness of the bed, staring at the ceiling. The apartment was silent, unlike the streets, where the sounds of sirens, shouting, and passing cars had been his nightly soundtrack. Sleep didn't come easy. His body was exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. Was this a dream? A trick? Would he wake up tomorrow to find it all gone? A knock at the door jolted him upright. Jason frowned, glancing at the clock. It was past midnight. Who would be here at this hour? His instincts kicked in, and he silently climbed out of bed, moving cautiously toward the door. He pressed his ear against it, listening. Nothing. Taking a deep breath, he cracked the door open. No one was there. Jason stepped into the hallway, his pulse quickening. The building was quiet, but then he noticed something at his feet. An envelope. He bent down, picking it up. His name was written on the front in neat, bold letters. Frowning, he ripped it open. Inside was a single note. "Trust is dangerous. Be careful who you believe." Jason's blood ran cold. Who had left this? And what did it mean? He whipped his head around, but the hallway was empty. A chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. And just like that, the safety he had started to feel shattered. Jason stared at the note, his fingers tightening around the paper. His breath came in short, sharp bursts as a familiar feeling settled in his gut. Paranoia, fear, the instinct to run. He spun around, standing the hallway empty. The only sound was the low hum of the building's heating system. No footsteps, no voices. Whoever had left the note had vanished. Jason stepped back into the apartment, locking the door behind him. His mind raced. Was this some kind of warning, a threat, or just a twisted joke? He reread the words. "Trust is dangerous. Be careful who you believe." His eyes darted to his phone. He had Ethan's number. Should he call? Tell him about this? No, he didn't even fully trust Ethan yet. What if this was about him? What if the note was a warning about the man who had taken him in? Jason exhaled sharply. He needed to clear his head. Tossing the note onto the counter, he grabbed his hoodie and slipped out of the apartment, heading for the stairwell instead of the elevator. His body was tense as he moved down the steps, his ears trained for any sound behind him. By the time he reached the ground floor, he was almost jogging. The doorman barely gave him a glance as he stepped outside, the cool night air hitting his skin. The city was still awake, neon lights flickering, cars honking in the distance. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked, his thoughts swirling. This was too good to be true. A won bid, a job, a powerful man offering him a way out. Now, a cryptic warning out of nowhere. His gut told him something was off. And if there was one thing Jason had learned on the streets, it was to trust his instincts. Jason walked for nearly an hour, letting the rhythm of the city settle his nerves. He ended up at an old diner on the corner of 7th Street, a place he had camped near before. The owner, a gruff older man named Wu, had occasionally given him leftover food when he closed up. Tonight, Lou barely glanced at him when Jason slid into a booth. "What can I get you, kid?" he asked, wiping his hands on a grease-stained rag. Jason hesitated. He actually had money now, thanks to Ethan. The thought felt strange. "Just a coffee," he said. Lou grunted and walked off. Jason tapped his fingers on the table, staring at the scratched-up surface. He needed answers. If someone was warning him, then that meant someone was watching him. But who? A few minutes later, a figure slid into the booth across from him. Jason tensed immediately. It was a woman, maybe in her late 20s, with short dark hair and sharp green eyes. She wore a leather jacket and had the look of someone who didn't take crap from anyone. Jason's muscles coiled. "Who the hell are you?" The woman leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "I was wondering when you'd show up here." Jason's pulse spiked. "What?" She smirked. "I know who you are, Jason. And I know about Ethan Cole." Jason went still. "What do you mean?" The woman studied him. "You think he's just some good guy trying to help you out?" She shook her head. "You have no idea what you've walked into." Jason clenched his fists. "If you're the one who left that note, just say it." The woman didn't blink. "I did." Jason's blood ran cold. Lou appeared with the coffee, setting it down between them. He glanced at the woman but didn't say a word before walking off. Jason grabbed the cup more for something to do than anything else. "Why should I believe anything you say?" The woman leaned in slightly. "Because Ethan Cole isn't who you think he is. And if you don't get out now, you're going to regret it." Jason's stomach twisted. "Who are you?" She hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "My name is Alex Moser, and I used to be just like you." Jason's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The walls were closing in. Jason's grip on the coffee cup tightened as he stared at Alex Moser. The way she looked at him, like she saw through him, like she knew something he didn't, made his skin crawl. "What do you mean, just like me?" Jason asked, his voice low. Alex leaned forward, her green eyes flickering with something unreadable. "I mean, I was exactly where you are now, homeless, desperate. Then Ethan Cole swooped in, just like he did with you. Gave me a place to stay, a job, a future." Jason's stomach churned. "So, what happened?" Alex scoffed, shaking her head. "I learned the hard way that nothing comes free. Not from Ethan." Jason swallowed, his throat dry. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Ethan had done nothing but help him. But something in her eyes told him she wasn't lying. He forced himself to keep his voice steady. "If he's so bad, why warn me?" Alex's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't have anyone to warn me. And by the time I realized what I was caught up in, it was too late." Jason's heart pounded. "Too late for what?" Alex glanced around the diner, lowering her voice. "Ethan Cole isn't just some generous billionaire. He collects people, Jason. People like us. People who have nothing. He gives them a taste of something better: security, money, a home, but it comes at a cost." Jason shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. He hasn't asked me for anything." Alex exhaled sharply. "Yet, that's how he works. He waits, lets you get comfortable, lets you feel safe. Then, when you think you owe him everything, when you believe he's the only reason you're not back on the streets, that's when he cashes in." Jason felt a cold sweat forming at the base of his neck. He wanted to call her crazy, but deep down, something about what she was saying rang true. Ethan had seemed almost too perfect, too willing to help. "What does he want?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex hesitated, then leaned in even closer. "Power, loyalty, and control. He makes sure you are so deep in his world that, by the time you realize what's happening, you can't walk away." Jason's stomach clenched. "You walked away?" Alex let out a bitter laugh. "No, I ran, and I've been looking over my shoulder ever since." Jason's hands trembled slightly as he stared down at the table. He thought about the apartment, the job offer, The way Ethan had looked at him like he actually mattered. Could it all have been a lie? Or worse, was it all a trap? Alex pulled something from her jacket pocket and slid it across the table. A small flash drive. "This has proof," she said. "Bank records, conversations, things that'll show you exactly what Ethan Cole really..." Jason hesitated. "Why should I believe you?" Alex's expression softened for the first time. "Because I know what it's like to want to believe someone actually gives a damn about you. And I know what it feels like when that illusion shatters." Jason stared at the drive. If what she was saying was true, then taking this would change everything. His fingers hovered over it, his heart hammering in his chest. Then, the door to the diner swung open. Jason's head snapped up, and his blood turned to ice. Ethan Cole stood at the entrance, his sharp eyes scanning the room. When they landed on Jason, a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. Jason felt his whole world tilt. Everything inside him screamed that this was the moment that would decide his future. And no matter what choice he made, nothing would ever be the same again. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you don't miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.